What's up, degenerate gamblers, and welcome to the Friday Undefeated Post-Weigh-In Show, UFC Vegas 68 edition, brought to you by Pub Sports Radio, sponsored by Superbook Sports, the Die-Hard MMA podcast, the number one MMA-related Friday show. Never been wrong, never missed a bet, never missed a read. The tinfoil hat does not lie. We're going to take one final look at these fighters as they step on the scales today, give you a nice little package of all the information we've talked about over the course of the week and try and help you make a better bet tomorrow for UFC Vegas 68. Let's get the party started. First fight of the night is Jesus Aguilar taking on Taira. We've got Aguilar making 125 pounds. Tatsu came in at 125 and a half. Aguilar was all smiles. I like this kid. Gave a big flex. Taira, no emotion whatsoever. The guy is a stone cold killer. Absolute. He's a machine. He's a machine up there. Big height advantage for our guy Taira when they faced off. Aguilar, far more muscular though. I'm going to be very, very curious to watch the grappling exchanges here because we know Tatsuro is a beast on the mat, but Aguilar looks like he's got the man strength thing going on. Now, I think Tatsuro's well skilled enough to find his way to that submission eventually, but I would not be surprised if it took a little bit longer than some people are expecting. We're so used to Taira just blowing through people. I'm not convinced it's going to happen quite that quick this time. So I kind of have a little bit of a lean to the over 1.5. Obviously, I've got Tatsuro. I think he gets it done by sub. But I'm kind of thinking second or third round on this one, personally. Don't disrespect him, obviously. He could get it done in round one. The kid is that good. He could be making improvements and come out and just show us he's even better than we're expecting. I can't wait to find out. I'm pumped for that fight. Next up, we've got Jung-yeong Park taking on Dennis Tuliulan. We've got Park coming in at 185 and a half. Dennis made 186. And I love Jung-yeong Park, man. The Iron Turtle, he's such a fun guy. He's always throwing up the peace signs up there. Big smiles. Look good, no problems. Dennis, on the other hand, full of energy, showing his elbows off on the scale. I think this guy's got bad intentions here for this fight, and he's much bigger. This was a respectful face-off. These guys obviously don't have any problems with each other, but Dennis is big. Dennis is really big. Now, I do think that Jung-yeong Park will be able to stay safe and get the grappling going. Once he gets this fight to the floor, obviously it's up to him if he's going to grind or if he can find his way to a submission. But I do kind of think the under 2.5 might be the way to go in this spot. Dennis could clip Park on his way in, or if they're stuck at striking range for a while, he's got that big power. We've seen Park get clipped and hurt before. And then once they're on the ground, he does have to get by that, that big body of Dennis Tuliulan, but once he does, Park is the much better grappler of the two, and I kind of expect to have him have his way on the mat once they get it down there. So, violence in the second fight of the night as well. I think we're probably going to see a finish there too. I will pick Park. But I'm not laying the minus 215 sitting at Superbook right now on Jung-yeong Park. Let me pull up the props here. Park by sub is plus 350, and I might be a little bit interested, in something like that. But Tuliulan by knockout is plus 425. I mean, this is a prop type of fight to me. That's where you go with those two. Pick your poison, roll the dice, take a shot at a big number. That's the way I would approach this one personally. No bet for me right now, though. Next up, we got Mandy Bohm taking on Ji-Yoon Kim. Both ladies made 125 and a half pounds. Bohm was very calm, cool, and collected up there on the scales. She gave a good flex. She's looking very strong on the scales. Her opponent, Ji-Yoon Kim, just blank stare, no emotion. She gave her usual flex. She doesn't have any muscle though. Like there's nothing to flex. I always say that every time. She's very string beanie. So no disrespect, but it's always funny to me. Mandy Bohm, decent bit larger. Good face-off. Both ladies kind of seem to know what's at stake here on this one. Ji-Yoon Kim has swelled all the way up to minus 270. Dear God, minus 270. Folks, I have been extremely tempted on Mandy Bohm all week. I've been staring at this number and thinking this is just way too wide for Ji-Yoon Kim. And if Mandy Bohm is even close to the fighter that bookies and odds makers expected her to be in her last couple of fights, she'll be more competitive in this fight than that plus 230 line suggests. So I'm tempted. I haven't gotten there yet, but I am very, very tempted on taking a stab on Mandy Bohm here in this spot because frankly, Ji-Yoon Kim, She's got one knockout in the UFC, and she just has fought super closely and lost close split decisions that maybe she should have won. That's been her whole UFC career. I don't trust her to pull away as a minus 270 favorite over someone like Mandy Bohm, especially when Bohm, I think, has the significant grappling advantage if she chooses to go that route with it. So, sketchy fight. Be careful. God bless if you decide to go on it. If anything, it's dog or pass for me. You've got Sunguk Choi taking on Seung-Hyun Park. We've got 125.5 for Choi, 124.5 for Park. And Choi looked a little bit uncomfortable on the scales today, I'll be honest. These guys are a little bit hard to get a real read on, but he looked a little uncomfortable, okay physically. I don't know that there's any issue there. It might just be nerves. Park, on the other hand, was very calm, very measured, no emotion whatsoever, moved really well. These guys size up really well too. This is a really good matchup. Both guys were very calm and kept their distance. You're literally going to get nothing from this weigh-in read here because neither guy gave you anything. So right now you've got Choi at plus 170, Park the favorite at minus 190. I picked Park earlier in the week. I'm sticking with it. I do think he's probably the right side. A violence bet has some interest to me. These guys both know what they're doing in there, and they do have some finishing ability. I do think the calm demeanor is something that goes out the door once they close that cage. So the under 2.5 at plus 190 is interesting to me. But again, I don't have a good read on these guys, and I have no bet on it because of that. I'm treading very lightly this week. Very, very lightly. Tashinomi Kazama taking on Rinya Nakamura. I always get one step ahead of myself on the pronunciation of his name. Kazama made 136. Rinya made 135. Very intense stare from Kazama today. Absolutely terrifying. Like, he didn't budge the whole time he was on the scale. And then Rinya came in very dialed in, calm, cool, and collected once they faced off. Rinya tried to shake hands with this guy, and it was one of those super awkward moments where, like, you realize the other guy's didn't even notice you, doesn't know you exist. And Kazama kept that energy going. He was scary as hell the whole time. So I am terrified of Tashinomi Kazama in this spot here. Now, I did parlay up Rinya Nakamura. Obviously, just because you make an angry face doesn't mean you're going to win the fight. You've got a minus 500 favorite. You've got an Olympic hopeful wrestler, which is rare over in the Asian communities. I do think Kazama knows exactly what he's doing out there. He's a very dangerous fighter, but I expect Rinya to be able to control the pace. I think he's the more explosive striker. And then once they're on the ground, I will take the wrestling of Rinya over the scrambly jiu-jitsu of Kazama in this spot. So yeah, I got a parlay with Rinya Nakamura. I do think he can finish this fight on the feet or on the ground, whichever this direction this fight goes, but it should be one that's fun to watch. I'm tempted a little bit on the under too. The way Kazama fights and also the energy he's bringing to this thing, I actually think this one might get started in a hurry. Jeong-yeong Lee came in at 145. His opponent, Yiza, made 145.5. No issues from Lee. However, this guy's one of those like shredded skinny dudes. His rib cage was popping out like nothing I've ever seen before. He sucks down bad for this weight cut here. Now his opponent Yazi did the Panther thing on his forehead. You gotta love it. Got a little creative with the hair dye. He looked extremely intense and a little bit emotional. He kind of let loose like a half scream, half exhale once they called the weight out. I love it. Lee's huge though. Like, when they got to the face-off, Lee is absolutely massive. And this is why, with these guys, we don't know enough about them. I really needed to see them, get to this stage here because I was not expecting this size advantage here for Lee. I thought they were going to be a lot closer in size. Both guys got in super close. It was a respectful but a very good face-off. This should be a fun fight. I was a little bit tempted on Yiza, sorry about that, on Yazi, and then I just said it the wrong way again. I was a little tempted on Yiza as an underdog here in this spot, plus 210. I was also extremely tempted at his submission line because that's really his best path to victory is getting his opponent down, tying them into a pretzel, and that's 5-1, plus 500 on him to sync up a submission here. I kind of like that stab at the submission. Again, I have not bet anything. Totals at 1.5 for this one, and I could see it squeezing over the 1.5 at the minus 120 mark. But it's going to be a good one. Another one where I'm going to take lots of notes on. I'll be very curious to see how this goes. I guess at the end of the day, my pick is Lee to win, but it's kind of a dog or pass line as far as I'm concerned. I think Yiza might show us that he's very competitive here on Saturday. Next up, we've got Jubli taking on Jeka. We've got 155.5 for Jubli, 155 for Jeka, and Jubli came in very blank. I talked about how I wanted to see him on the scales. I was worried about his weight cut. He's a big guy for the weight class. Looked like he was all good to go. His opponent, Jeka, on the other hand, he's another one that had some serious mean mug going on today. Looked very mean, no problem making weight. He's smaller for the weight class, one of these, endless gas tank and energy type of dudes. Jubli is really big. Another one where I knew that he was going to have a size advantage, but when they actually face off, you're like, damn! And he's a minus 130 favorite. I spoke to my guy, Andrew, over with Superbook Sports. The betting handle, as far as like significant and sharp action, has been really light on this particular card. But it seems like the public is all over Jubli. They're getting overwhelming amounts of money on Jubli. None of it respected, none of it sharp, but it seems like the horde of casual bettors is all over Jubli here in this spot this weekend. Now, when they faced off, Jeka was kind of playing games. Like, he got up there, he's mean-mugging his guy, and then he took a step back and threw his fighting stance together, but he did it so quick, it looked like he was gonna, throw or something. I thought they were gonna go. I thought these guys were gonna go at it. And Jubli seemed to take that extremely personally because they couldn't hardly get him off the stage at that point, whereas Jeka was just kind of holding his martial arts stance on the stage. You gotta love it. Playing some mind games here. I'm looking at the violence here. I'm looking at the under 2.5. It's sitting at minus 120 at this point. That kind of a weigh-in, that kind of a face-off. You've got Anshul Jubli, who's a guy that really kind of banks those first 2 rounds of a fight, tries to survive that 3rd round as he's slowing down, as he's wearing down. And then his opponent, Jeka, on the other hand, is that fast twitch muscle type of kid that can finish the fight at any point in time. He's got multiple round 2 and 3 finishes, so this guy has that type of finishing ability even late in the fight. So if he does lose 1 or 2, he can always throw that Hail Mary. I could see Anshul Jubli just being too much for Jeka to handle, getting the early win, just mauling him with that size. I can also see Jeka starching him and finding a way to get that finish at any point in time, because that's kind of just what the kid does. Rather than pick a side, I may bet violence. I think that's my plan for this fight. Again, have not pulled the trigger just yet, but I especially love the intensity at the weigh-in if we're going to be looking for a violence bet. Next up, Adam Fugitt is taking on Yusaku Kinoshita. We've got Fugitt making 170.5. Kinoshita made 170.5 as well. Fugitt looked really good, throwing up the calm casual number 1 up there. He's really looking to get his career started in earnest here on this fight on Saturday with a full fight camp. Kinoshita was feeling himself. Went up there flexing a whole bunch of different times, different poses, having fun. This guy really looks like he's feeling himself. They call him the Asian Conor McGregor. He probably has a little bit of a confidence issue at the moment because of that. These guys size up really well. It was a good face-off, very respectful face-off, but the size is noticeable that they are very much the same. You're expecting one of these guys to be a little bit bigger, a little bit quicker. Fugitt's reach advantage with how they size up is really the thing that's kind of baffling here, because they are the same height, but Fugitt's going to have like a 6-inch reach advantage, I think, based on the UFC stats, if they are to be believed. And another one where I'm very tempted on this line being a little bit wide. This is the Dana White Contender Series fade spot of the week, folks. You get a kid coming off the Dana White's Contender Series, making their UFC debut against a guy who's had at least one UFC fight. You take the dog. That's it. Just blindly bet the dog. That's the pattern for the angle, and I have not been betting it as much. I think it went 1-1 the last event where there were opportunities there, so that plus money tends to just kind of even out long term. I worry a little bit about Adam Fugitt's chin, but I do think he's very live in this fight against a 22-year-old kid who's in love with his power. If Kinoshita is not just the mauling monster that he thinks that he is, Adam Fugitt can either teach him a thing or two on the ground, or if he's able to keep his distance with that jab and stay away from the power, use that reach advantage, I think we get a very competitive fight that Kinoshita maybe gets a little bit frustrated in because he's not able to bring that power to bear. I'm tempted. I'm very tempted on the dog here on Saturday. I also don't really want to pile up and lose 7 units on this kind of a crappy card where I know all of these are extremely sketchy prospects. So I'm not sure if I'm going to take these shots yet or not, or just try to bank 1 or 2 that I feel good about and run away with a small bag instead of looking for the whole thing on Saturday. Because this is a This is a card that's absolutely chock full of variance. Doo-Ho Choi taking on Kyle the Monster Nelson. Both guys made 145.5 pounds. You've got Doo-Ho Choi looking strong. He's shredded up there, looking like he's ready for this comeback. Kyle Nelson, another very solid human being at this weight class. The cut to 145 is not an easy one for him. He's fought at 155 multiple times. Very intense, strong looking, slight height advantage for Doo-Ho Choi. It's nothing to write home about. These guys size up pretty dang well. This was a respectful face-off as well, and money just overwhelmingly on Doo-Ho Choi is what it seems like. We all have the same opinion. We know Kyle Nelson slows down after the first round. We all think Doo-Ho Choi is the more technical fighter, but we've also seen him chinned and dropped by people before. Obviously, guys that are higher level than Kyle Nelson, but it's happened. So it's kind of hard to lay too big of a price number on Doo-Ho Choi. I do like Doo-Ho Choi. I do think he wins this fight more often than not. And I do think he wins by knockout more often than not. Now, over on Superbook, they've got the knockout prop at plus 115. I know it's plus 120, plus 125 sometimes at other books. That to me tells you that I think Superbook kind of agrees with me that Doo-Ho Choi probably does win, and they're kind of protecting themselves a little bit on that knockout prop, having that price not be too enticing over there. I like it. I'm probably going to play Doo-Ho Choi by knockout because I don't really want to lay the minus 185, and frankly, I've got a real hard time seeing this thing go 15 minutes. Doo-Ho Choi did talk about taking it slower. He did talk about letting the knockout come to him, but the way Kyle Nelson fights, it's gonna be there. So it's not like he's gonna have the option to just sit back and take a nice coasty decision, because Kyle Nelson will force the fight at some point. His whole thing is get in your face, pin you up against the cage, and wing bombs. He's talked about getting out of this thing in round one. So if he's fighting that way, Doo-Ho Choi also will have to retaliate the same way. I think that knockout probably comes a little quicker than maybe even Doo-Ho Choi is wanting it to if it's going to happen. And I'd rather get the plus money than laying minus 185, especially when we think that's the highly likely outcome. Blagoy Ivanov taking on Marcin Tybura. Ivanov came in at 256.5. Marcin made 253.5. No issues for Blagoy. Obviously, he's one of these smaller, stockier heavyweights. Never the most physically impressive looking. He's always carrying that extra poundage on him. Marcin Tybura, he actually looked pretty impressive to me on the scales. Now, and you guys know, I try to keep this as unbiased as humanly possible. I've got a bet on Blagoy Ivanov. I took the plus 110. I've been a Marcin Tybura hater for the majority of my career. I just don't think he's quite that good. And I think that Baga is very underrated here in this spot. I think he should be the one that's slightly favored, but it is a little concerning because Marcin Tybura looks like he came into this thing taking this camp very seriously, and I said Blagoy is a guy that you can never really look to his physique for any type of inspiration, but he does not look like that's the same story on his side. And Marcin is much bigger than I expected. When these guys faced off, I really thought there was going to be a more similar height situation going on here, but Marcin was way bigger and taller in this spot than I expected. Very respectful face-off. Both guys kept their distance. I've only got the 1 unit shot on Blagoy. I did take a little half unit stab at the Blagoy by knockout because it's 6-1, because Marcin has had those chin issues in the past, before he had this career resurgence where he was frankly scraping the bottom tier of UFC fighters and facing only guys that primarily gas out and slow down. He was getting chinned by all the good fighters in the heavyweight division. So I took the stab on the plus 600 because that possibility is live. I know Blagoy is mostly a decision machine himself, but he hits pretty damn hard. I mean, he dropped Tai Tuivasa when they fought. Like, that power is there. If he connects the right way, he absolutely could get that knockout here on Saturday. So this is going to be a very interesting fight. I'm very uncomfortable with this bet at this point. I'm still thinking Blagoy, I'm trusting my read. I think Blagoy should be favored. I'm okay with making the bet at plus 110, but I'd be a little bit more comfortable if the size discrepancy wasn't quite what it is. Co-main event, Devin Brown Bear Clark taking on Da-Un Jung. We've got Clark at 204.5, Da-Un Jung 205 on the dot, and Clark looked thick. It looks a little puffy to me up there, folks. He might have put a little extra muscle on for this one. I talk about how small he is for the weight class. I talk about how his thighs are the only thing 205. Maybe he heard me. He looks like he put a little bit of upper body mass on coming into this fight. Da-Un Jung, though, first to the scale, looked great. I mean, he looked relaxed. This dude is huge. He's absolutely massive, and he's built really well for the division. Not too muscly, not too slim. Like, he looks like he's just the perfect body type, height, and size to be a beast at the 205-pound division in the UFC. This was a good, respectful face-off. Jung, obviously the bigger of the two fighters. I do have Jung closing out that parlay that I mentioned earlier. I want to say it's like minus 141 that I got for the number. It's those two, and then Blagoy. Those are my only bets on the card so far. I'm looking at some of these unders. I think that's the move. A couple of these long shot sprinkles on these big numbers for like the method of victory finishes and stuff like that, and violence, rather than picking sides and getting caught too much up and thinking I know who's who when we have never seen these guys fight at this level. I think that's the way to go for the rest of this card. Main event time, Derrick Lewis taking on Sergey Spivak. Lewis tipping the scales at 265, Spivak 255.5. Derrick Lewis looked really intense on the scales today. He gave a solid flex. He honestly looked really strong. And he didn't look skinny Lewis. Like, I know everyone made a big thing about this, that he's lost so much weight and he's looking like he's toned down. And he talked about getting sick with COVID and throwing up a whole bunch. I thought maybe it was the fact that he lost mass and it was very unhealthy for him. But on the scales, he looked like classic Derrick Lewis to me. When you got Sergey Spivak coming up next, though, this guy was stone cold up there. Threw his arm up in victory already. Classic Sergey Spivak. The dude is, your classic extra heavyweight up there. Lewis got in real close for this thing. I mean, didn't even wait for the handshake to finish. Stepped in on Sergey Spivak and practically touched him with his fist. Slight size advantage goes to Sergey Spivak. And this is, I've been talking about it all week. I've been going back and forth on this one all week. I just think we've hit that point where the Black Beast is being disrespected. Anytime he gets a step down in competition, anytime he's fighting somebody who is not in the top 5, he just nukes them. He finds a way to land that power shot. And Sergey Spivak is a young up-and-coming fighter. He absolutely is. And we do think he's going to be, a top 8er type of guy. But is he there yet? Is he ready yet? The couple times he's faced real power punchers in this division, he's gotten knocked out in the first. So we've got a history there of him struggling with this type of fighter. Derrick Lewis can get taken down in this spot. He will get taken down in this spot. But we've also seen Derrick Lewis actually be able to hang with guys that are willing to take him down. And then he comes back and he finds his shot once they slow down in the second or the third. I know a lot of people are kind of gearing up for that round 1 KO. And don't worry, I get it. The price is sexy. But I actually kind of think Derrick Lewis might take his time here a little bit. Like, he could bum rush Sergey Spivak. It's Lewis. Of course he could. I like the plus 190. I like the plus 260 by knockout. He could get it done. He could get it done quickly. But rather than get an extra $1 for the round 1, I would just play the knockout straight personally if you're on Derrick Lewis's side, because Sergey Spivak is a solid wrestler and he picks these big 300-pound men up and he has no problem getting them back down to the mat 3, 4, 5 times in a row. And if he does that and he tires out and he can't get the submission on Derrick Lewis, if he can't quite get enough damage going with the ground and pound, Derrick Lewis will be there in the second round. Derrick Lewis will be there in the third round, and he'll look for one of those big bombs when Sergey has to eventually close the range to get the grappling going. So I would caution anybody going that round 1 KO prop for like an extra 80 cents or $1. I think the KO at plus 260, it's a number we don't often get with Derrick Lewis, and that's fine for me to have those extra couple rounds included in there. If you're playing with the Sergey Spivak side and counting on Derrick Lewis being shot and out, especially with everything going on with the sickness, I can't say I blame you with that angle either. This is a really volatile card, everybody. Pick your spots carefully. Don't go too hard, because there's a lot of randomness I think that we're going to see on Saturday. I think we're going to see some very surprising results. I hope you all have a good weekend. I hope you all hit some of your props and your plays and make some cash. Make sure you join the free Pick'em tournament over on pubsportsradio.com. I'm going to be loading up my picks here in just about 5 minutes. It's a free contest. There are cash prizes. We're doing a season-long thing, so you'll be able to see, who's king of the hill and stuff like that. Your boy won last week, so I got a title to defend. And then, of course, make sure you join us for the live stream. This is a nighttime card, folks. They're advertising for the Asian community for this one, obviously, with all the Korean and Chinese and Japanese fighters on this card. So it's going to be much, much later than our normal cards, which means we're going to be up drinking Fireball at midnight on Saturday, going into Sunday for this one. Come hang out live on pubsportsradio.com. Hit the like button on your way out. Good luck again. Let's roll.